Welcome to Marketplace Tech Bytes, our weekly review of some of the biggest stories making news across the industry. I'm Stephanie Hughes. This week, Google drops pledge to not use AI in weapons and surveillance. ChatGPT expands to California state universities. And Uber and Waymo expand their robotaxi service. Joining me to talk about this is Natasha Mascarenhas, a reporter with the information. Hey, Natasha.
Hey, Stephanie. How's it going?
Good. Nice to talk to you. So we're going to start with our bite of the week. This is one number that gives some context about what's going on in tech. So, Natasha, what's your number?
Yeah, this number is a big one. I chose 1.1 billion.
That is a big one. 1.1 billion what?
It's the price. So it's the price behind one of the biggest crypto acquisitions, that has happened. And the context is Stripe, a payments giant that I follow super closely. One of the largest private technology companies just finalized an acquisition of Bridge, a cryptocurrency company. And it's Stripe's biggest acquisition to date. And I think a lot of people are seeing that as a bellwether for other cryptocurrency companies to both raise in this environment, but also land mass adoption.
Yeah, and Bridge deals specifically with stablecoins, right? That's crypto that's tied to a particular asset. Yeah, is that right?
Exactly. Like its name almost tells you where we're at. Still looking for some stability, but really open to it. And to Stripe's credit, Stripe has really been taking steps towards being a platform that is a go-to for people who want to use cryptocurrency and are looking to get more deeper into payments.
Yeah, fascinating. Okay, so let's take on our first big topic. Google is dropping its pledge to not use AI in weapons and surveillance. So Google created principles back in 2018 on how it thinks AI should be used and what it would and would not do. And the company originally had language that said Google wouldn't create AI that would be used in weapons or for surveillance purposes. And that language has gone away. We reached out to Google for comment. They didn't respond. But the company did say in a blog post this week that, quote, democracies should lead in AI development and that companies and governments should work together to create AI that, among other things, supports national security. So, Natasha, why do you think we're seeing this change from Google now?
Yeah, I mean, it's been the steady march towards large organizations sort of going towards broader language when it comes to the types of use cases their technology will be used in. About 1 year ago, OpenAI, walked back a similar ban. Fast forward, we saw OpenAI announce a partnership with Anduril, one of the biggest weapons machinery tech companies, to deploy its AI models within national security efforts, especially with the new administration looking to embrace technology in a way that is making a lot of headlines. It's not surprising to me to see Google go for a broader policy. Also, the Washington Post has reported that it's been reportedly providing some of its AI to Israel's Ministry of Defense and Israel Defense Forces, which has both been a source of employee protests over the past year, but also, perhaps a factor into why we're seeing this sort of shift in its verbatim policy.
Yeah. And as you say, other major AI developers do work in defense. Like, is this just too big a market for Google to ignore?
We've seen the rise of funds focused on national security and, American dynamism might be a phrase you'll hear a lot more in the next few years, if not already. But yeah, I definitely think it's clear that the two worlds are merging between technology and defense, and there's appetite for both to work together. And so turning down that business clearly isn't a place that they have to go. And so, they're not. And I think in many ways, I was actually surprised that Google had this policy up until now, because we really have seen a lot of companies build closer relationships with defense companies and just with the government in general. Of course, Google, like you mentioned, the blog post that they said, which I think many people saw as their indirect way of addressing this, which is, we have a better understanding of AI's potential. We have a better understanding of its risks. Still want to focus on like human rights and international law, but is clearly, based on this change, seeing opportunity to to support some of the efforts that are happening across the country.
Yeah. And I want to ask, Google employees in the past have really, spoken out against the company being involved in certain kinds of defense contracts. Do you think we could see any similar backlash this time, or do you think we're in a different moment than we were, 6 years ago, 7 years ago?
It's funny. I think there's been, I cover private companies so much, and so I'm often hearing it from the perspective of private companies. And when OpenAI announced that it was doing this, and then fast forward, it launched this partnership with Anduril. There was, a subset of employees that were pretty upset that it had taken that stance.
At OpenAI, yeah.
At OpenAI, yeah. And so, no, yeah, I definitely think it is within its realm to see some sort of surprise or frustration with this. And like I said, employees have been protesting Google selling cloud computing to Israel's military over the past year for several reasons. And I think, it's something that has precedent in that way.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to turn to another use of AI. ChatGPT is expanding to California state universities. OpenAI announced this week it'll make ChatGPT EDU available. It's fun, a lot of letters, to more than 500,000 students and faculty on the Cal State University campuses. This is the largest four-year system in the country, so a lot of people. Natasha, a lot, maybe all college students already use the free version of ChatGPT. This is one for academic institutions. What do you think this means? Like, how could this change what school's like for these students?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it's been actually started my tech reporting career covering education. It has been a goal of the ed tech sector to adopt something that can be this kind of contract. So it's a huge win for OpenAI. When OpenAI first announced ChatGPT EDU, they said that it would be a little different than the ChatGPT that students are already using in their free versions. Better models, more affordable, and really enterprise level security. It's being adopted across several institutions, but I think the real value from for such a big partnership like this is sort of like equal access and fluency when it comes to using AI. So much of the ed tech sector is focused on like, is AI going to be something that leads to cheating, or is it going to be a really effective tutor? But even being able to interact and navigate and prompt models is a skill set that really empowers the future generation of people looking for jobs. And so when I saw that it was having this massive rollout, I was like, okay, one, really good win for OpenAI, depending on the contract and pricing. And then number two is win for students who are looking for access and more of like a buy-in across their entire university towards getting smarter on it and not needing to hide it and use it on their phone in the free version. You see a little bit of a deeper integration, which usually can lead to more people using it effectively.
I think you're right. I think there's been a big shift in higher ed where, at first it was like, oh man, what is happening?
Totally.
And now it's just that's more accepting. And also, how do we make more AI literate students that can go to a workplace where this is going to be a tool or even a colleague? I want to ask one thing. OpenAI has called this an affordable offering for universities. In the future, do you think there could be a divide between students at schools that pay to have access, to a certain version and those that don't?
That's a fascinating question, and one that I haven't thought about a ton. I mean, I think that's been an issue in ed tech for a long time. The idea that, can you afford a fancy SAT tutor or do you have to use, Quizlet, a free version of Quizlet, and sort of like that disconnect when you're trying to upskill yourself. I think the exciting part about ChatGPT EDU, and again, don't know too much about its pricing, is if it is deeply integrated and available to all students, then, it is using models that are quite advanced and not as great as and far better than the ones that you'll get on a free version of ChatGPT. So it almost balances it a little bit. Yeah. Can someone go and pay for the, potentially $200 per month tier of OpenAI? Yeah. Of course. And I'm curious if that would be like incrementally different based on some of like the questions or tailoring. But it's a good question, and one that I think a lot of universities may, look to get enterprise deals with OpenAI. So there isn't that huge, disparity within the student base, or at least one would hope.
Yeah, it's definitely something to watch as this moves forward. So I want to take you to our final story. Uber and Waymo are expanding their robotaxi service. So Uber has a partnership with Google's autonomous car company Waymo, and those driverless cars have been in Phoenix. They may have been where you are in San Francisco. They're coming to Austin. Uber announced this week that riders in Austin can get on a wait list in order to hail a Waymo once they're driving around. It's been a minute since I've been in a driverless car. The last time I was in one, it was sort of like a cross between a really cautious teenage driver and a really boring roller coaster. I imagine you've been in one more recently. What's your sense of what these rides are like now?
Oh my gosh, that's a perfect way to put it. It takes like 10, yeah, it takes like 10 minutes longer to get anywhere. But personally, I'm super comfortable in them. Like, yes, it's a great party trick when people come to visit me in San Francisco, but I've been really comfortable in them and actually opting for them. One thing to note, as just someone who lives in San Francisco and is constantly looking for like the best deal, I've been really interested and excited by the fact that the prices are starting to look more, the prices at Waymo are starting to look equal, sometimes less than Uber and Lyft.
Mhm.
And while my colleagues and I have often talked about, shouldn't it be a lot cheaper? There's no, human in there that you have to pay. I think seeing the prices slowly start to drop is a good sign that we'll get to a cheaper place. But up until, the last 2 months, I feel like it was like more of a luxury thing to call Waymo. So now I've been using them as my primary source of transportation.
That's really fun. And just to check, are you taking the Waymo cars or are you taking the Uber Waymo cars via Uber?
Great question. No, yeah, only Waymo. So I believe this may change, but I believe that Waymo only is offered through the Waymo app in San Francisco. But when it comes to Austin, thanks to this Uber partnership that you brought up, it'll be through the Uber app.
Right.
Really interesting to see the partnership happen. Because Uber itself has spent lots of money,
So much money.
1 billion plus trying to do its own version of this, eventually had to, sell off that division of its business. And so very interesting to see the CEO prioritize a partnership like this.
I want to say I've had some really great conversations with Uber drivers. Obviously in a Waymo car, no driver, no chat, I'm guessing, unless you're chatting with the AI.
Yeah.
What's your sense of what's gained and what's lost as driverless rides become more prevalent?
Yeah. So what's gained is personally, like, I think comfort and like privacy slash security. I especially like taking a late night car home or just feeling like, that sense of feeling like you're in a secure spot feels great. And there's like a really immediate customer service support if you do feel that way. It's interesting. You can barely make it 5 seconds without having a seatbelt on. So I think there's like some interesting sort of like just human comfort things that are being prioritized there.
Mm-hmm.
What you lose is obviously this is like a huge market and source of income for people. And so understanding like how that impacts the market and how that drives earnings down or pricing changes for people who are driving Ubers, driving Lyfts is a question I have. And of course, like there's been, a fair share of accidents. While I say you gain security, there's also been really fair and real worries about if this technology is ready to be widespread. Yes, it's in San Francisco, but I've actually watched it go from only being able to drop you off a few blocks from a busy street to be able to drop you off on the street to, just sort of like so many like little stops and starts. And we've obviously seen some companies have to leave the streets as well, such as Cruise. So I think there is a little bit of like the jury is still out in if we gain enough from the business.
Natasha Mascarenhas, a reporter with The Information. Natasha, thank you so much for talking with me.
Thank you. This was awesome.
And thanks to all of you for joining us for Marketplace Tech Bytes Week in Review. Daniel Shin produced this episode. I'm Stephanie Hughes. This is APM.